Welcome to the Mick, Mook, and Mike.
Hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer
Frank Mace and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest,
Emmy Award-winning journalist and co-author of the explosive new book, Gambler, Armen Keteyian.
My brother
Frankie. How are you, pal?
I'm fine. Who do we got today?
Oh, we got your friend,
Whoa.
and, friend of the programs, and sports journalist, and CBS producer, Armen
Keteyian. Keteyian.
Yeah, it's just a very difficult name to pronounce.
For you,
For me,
you need
Frank Bass.
you need a name like O'Leary, O'Hara,
Oh,
fuckface.
oh, fuckface. Yeah, I'm looking forward. He's got a great new book out. And,
Yeah, we talked to him about 2 years ago when he did Tiger Woods' book, and that was out. And you were dying to ask him about Billy Walters' book, but he couldn't talk about it at the time. So now the book is due to be released, or has been recently released, and we can talk about it now.
Well, you know, as a former bookmaker, and I got to tell you, back in the day when somebody would call us up to make a bet, and this would be from another bookmaker. Like, you know, some bookmakers would call you up, and when a bookmaker calls you up to make a bet, you know he's got a hot game. You know, it's a game he wants to bet. So a lot of guys won't take the action, but we give them a dime. We give them $1,000 on the game, just so we wanted the information so we could go out and bet it ourselves, right?
Yep.
But if a guy told me it was a Billy Walters game, bookmaker called up and say, "Oh, yeah, I like Chicago +3 for a dime. And by the way, it's a Billy Walters game." Well, that was like
Well,
money in the bank.
Save
you know?
all that Billy Walters background for Armers, because
Yeah.
he wrote the Billy Walters biography. It's called Secrets from a Life at Risk. It's coming out, or it's just recently out, and Billy goes into a lot of secrets.
Yeah. Well, I actually, we'll talk when Armen comes on. But a friend of mine in the Bronx got busted in the Bronx when Billy went to jail.
Yeah. So
Save
it'll be
that.
Cool. So I want to ask you a year history buff. Who are the first 10 presidents of the United States?
I'm a history buff, but that's a tough question. Let's see. Obviously Washington, then Adams, and then
Who's your favorite?
Jefferson.
Okay, that's the third one.
Then Madison.
Madison, okay. And then Quincy Adams was 5, I think.
6, you said.
I
you said
thought
6.
but I think Derek said 5.
6, yeah.
Okay, so who was 5?
Monroe.
Monroe. James Monroe.
Because when we did Girl Meets World, it was a spinoff of Boy Meets World. The president of the high school they went to in Boy Meets World was James Adams, and the high school
John
Adams, and the high school that they went to in Boy Meets World was John Quincy Adams. And that was because in deference to Billy Daniels, who played John Adams in 1776, and he was Mr. Whoever in both Boy Meets World and Girl Meets World. He was the principal, and he was their teacher, in Mr. Feeney.
It's John Quincy Adams. Everybody knows about John Adams. Everybody's read about John Adams. John Quincy Adams, 16th president. 6th president, excuse me. I was reading about his childhood in John Adams, and he was like 7 years old. He was reading the history of the Peloponnesian Wars, and John Adams told him, "Don't read it in English, learn Greek, and then read it in Greek," because at 7, he was doing Euclidean math at 8.
What else could he have to do? He couldn't watch TV. He couldn't go on TikTok.
No TikTok. And then we elected a president.
No computers. What else could he do? And he had to read at night. He had to read during the day. Because
never got indicted.
Never got indicted.
What kind of guy was he? But I mean, it's amazing. Like, you look at that. You look at John Adams and then John Quincy Adams and see the level of education, and then go from George Bush to Shrub,
Well,
see the leap.
Biden and Trump go to that.
Yeah, it's going to be another rerun too. It's inevitable. It's unbelievable.
So okay, who's 7? Who is 7? Quincy Adams, Jackson.
Andy came in later, right? Andy came in. Let's see, we got.
Yeah, after Adams.
Okay,
Jackson.
7.
The Jackson's right after Adams.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So he's 7.
who was 8, 9, 10? We'll never guess.
Okay, so after Jackson is
Polk?
Van Buren. Harrison, Tyler, Polk, Taylor, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan.
I got a great Millard Fillmore story. So my grandmother, I'll never forget, Millard Fillmore was the 13th president of the United States, because my grandmother was sitting at home one day and her phone rings. So she answers it and she says, "Hello, whoever this is. This is so-and-so and so-and-so from radio station WPIX in New York. If you can answer this question, we'll send you $100. And the question was, who was the 13th president of the United States? Well, my grandmother didn't know. She later found out that it was Millard Fillmore, and that's how I remember Millard Fillmore.
You're probably the only guy in the United States who remembers who the 13th president was.
I probably was.
But that's a pretty safe question for a radio thing to give you $100. They should give you, if you can answer that question, they should give you a new identity and a house in Italy.
Yeah. Well, and then we talked about John Adams and John Quincy Adams High School. The high school and head of the class was Millard Fillmore High School. Because I think Rich Eustace and Michael Elias, who was a friend of the show, said, "Who was the most obscure president that we ever had?"
Wow.
And they settled on Millard Fillmore.
Well, that's pretty obscure. There was a bar in Queens, not too far from where my joint was, called Millard Fillmore's, and I went in there just because I thought, what an amazing name for a bar. I mean, who the hell would call a bar Millard Fillmore? You know, But yeah, so you're probably the only guy in America that can answer that question. Who was the 13th president? Never forget.
Yep.
Anybody know what he did? Did he do anything? 4 years?
Well, that's two things he's named after. So he's not so obscure any Fillmore.
Well, a saloon in Queens is hardly like a terrific legacy, right?
You didn't get it.
He's hardly.
Let me see what he did.
He's
hardly obscure.
He's hardly obscure any Fillmore.
Okay, so can you guess what party he was in?
I'll say he's a Whig.
He really was. How did you know that?
Because I'm a fucking screwball. I don't know. I know shit that's not important.
Well, that's crazy. And as he was a vice president also.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it says, as vice president, Fillmore was largely ignored by Taylor. Zachary Taylor. I think Zachary Taylor was only president for a month. Was he the president for a month?
Yeah, it says 1849 to 1850. So probably something like that. But let's look that up. Did you look it up?
Well, I'm looking at it, but I can't read that fast.
Oh, okay.
Well, anybody who's interested can look it up for themselves. Let's move on.
Anybody coming in for a history lesson? You with us?
All right. Well, we got a lot to talk to Armen about. So why don't we get Armen on? I mean, I've known Armen since he was 28. We worked together in an advertising agency in San Diego. He left us to go to Sports Illustrated in New York. And he parlayed that into a career with ABC and CBS. He was a correspondent for 60 Minutes. He's a terrific writer. He's probably wrote 10, 11, 12 books so far. So let's get Armen Keteyian on. Emmy Award winning sports journalist.
Without a doubt. Can't wait to talk to him about this new project.
There he is.
Hello, Frank.
How are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. You remember Billy?
Good to see you again, Armen.
I remember that face. Yes, I do.
and Derek?
Hello.
Yes, I remember Derek.
Thanks for coming on again, Armen. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me.
You've got another book out. Billy Walters, Secrets of
I have another book. Well, it's
Secrets of a
I'm
Lifetime
the
of Risk.
collaborator. I'm the collaborator on this one. This is Billy's book, and we devoted 3 years of our lives to it. So I'm really proud of it. I think it's one of the best. It may be the best book I've ever done, and that takes in Tiger Woods and the system and raw recruits and a few others. So I'm really proud of this one.
What makes it so great?
Well, it's Billy's story. I've interviewed, Frank, our relationship goes back to the late 70s. I've interviewed thousands and thousands and thousands of athletes and coaches and, everyone from Bill Belichick to Nick Saban to Tom Izzo to Peyton Manning to Tom Brady to Lance Armstrong, all the way on down. And I've never met anybody like Billy. He's got an amazing life story, personal story. Not as only is he the greatest sports gambler in the history of sports gambling, and that's not me saying that. That's on the back of the book. You have everybody from Jimmy Vaccaro to Jack Binion to Kenny White to Roxy Roxborough. I'll just read you one quote from Jack Binion, who was the former owner, and he ran the Binion's Horseshoe Casino. If there's a Mount Rushmore of sports gambling, there's only one face on the mountain, and that's Billy Walters. No one else is close. So that pretty much sums it up. But if that was the only thing that Billy had done in his life, I think it would be an interesting book. This is a incredible Horatio Alger story. I mean, rags to riches, to rags to riches, to rags to riches, to rags to riches.
Recording in progress.
He's been broke, I don't know, countless times in his life. And he's turned it around. He's not only successful in sports gambling, but he was an incredible businessman, owned 13 golf courses at one point in time, 22 car dealerships. He's been a very savvy investor in the stock market. He was involved with the Computer Group, which was the first syndicate to use computer algorithms and proprietary data to bet against the spread, the posted line. So, in all the 40 plus years I've been doing interviews with people, Billy's far and away the most interesting person I've ever met in my life.
Wow. It's an incredible thing to be successful in sports gambling. I mean, that itself is, it's just not done.
The odds are honestly, Billy, it's like 99% of the people that bet lose. You have to win. You have to win 52.38% of your bets just to break even because you're betting 11 to 10 on the odds, 110 to win 100. And you can bet other ways. You can bet the money line straight up and things like that. But the odds of somebody not only winning for 1 year or 2 years in a row, and that doesn't count paying your taxes, and you might be part of a syndicate, or you might be purchasing some kind of data from somebody, so you have to add those costs in. Billy was a successful gambler for 36 straight years. He made money for 36 straight years. That's an unheard of record in sports gambling. No one will ever touch it. And how he did it is a big part of the book. There's 2 chapters, actually 3. There's 2 chapters one is called Masterclass. The other one is called Advanced Masterclass, where Billy, for the first time, he's 77 years old, for the first time in his life, he reveals the secrets of his system, the way he thinks, all the factors that he uses to go in before he makes a bet or decides not to make a bet. It's almost, I counted it up today, it's about almost 60 pages of the book are devoted specifically to the Billy Walters system. And, it's just remarkable. And I think if anybody of the now tens of millions of people that bet legally in this country, if they have any interest in trying to push the odds a little bit more in their favor, for $30-something, it's a pretty indispensable buy.
Yeah, before you came on, Armen, Billy was talking about a Billy Walters game. Why don't you repeat
Yeah, well, what you're talking about here, just the 2 chapters alone for our audience out there, to get Billy Walters' key to handicapping is worth the price of admission. I mean, there you go right there. That's 2 chapters.
Honest to God, Billy, I said the same thing.
Well, and Billy,
I was a bookmaker. As you know, my first book was Confessions of a Bronx Bookie, and I was a bookmaker out of desperation because I was losing so much money gambling, betting sports, and I said, "Hey, I can't stop gambling. Why don't I get on the right side of this?" So I started taking action. And that's what we did. Of course, you're still gambling, which is, your cure has become the disease, But
right.
But back in the 70s when I was bookmaking, we got a phone call from another bookmaker, and he say, "Look, I want to make a bet, but be forewarned, this is a Billy Walters game." When I heard it was a Billy Walters game, I mean, we'd give him $1,000 as a courtesy, and then go out and start betting the game ourselves because it was a Billy Walters game.
Absolutely.
You know, so
And that was the big thing is everybody was trying to get Billy's number once the computer group started in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, they crushed the books for like 5 years. And then Billy went off on his own and worked with Michael Kent, who was really the founder of the computer group. But the links that people would go to try to get his number, and those were the days of beepers and Nextels. And so they were trying to clone his beepers. They rifled his trash. They offered bribes to the people that were betting on Billy's behalf. Everybody was trying to get whatever the number was that Billy had on a game. And Billy, and you'll see in the book, I mean, he devised this incredible system over time to conceal and disguise where the bets were coming from. And at one point in time, he had 1,600 accounts around the world. And he had guys in Ireland and England and Mexico and the Bahamas, all over the world, betting on his behalf, often using, phones that would disguise their voice, or Vonage boxes where they could, where the area codes were not from where the original bets were being made, but from the areas in which the bettors were actually living. He talks about this in detail in the book, and it's mind-boggling to think of the degree that he would go, and so oftentimes his wife Susan and people that work for Billy, you're betting all day, and then the last thing you do at night is you have to go through all the bets and line them up and make sure they're all right, and then figure out which one of those accounts is hot, which one is cooled off, and which one. He actually had a system where it was like a stoplight. It was red, it was yellow, and it was green. And he would maneuver certain people that were betting for him, giving them certain bets that would either cool them off so the bookie wouldn't think that it was a Billy Walters bet, or if they were green, he would often bet big money with those people. But sometimes he would actually give his people the wrong numbers to push the bets and the lines in a direction that he wanted it to go, so he could bet heavily on the other side. And so it's this, we have a chapter called Cat and Mouse, and that's exactly what it is. And I mean, you know that, Billy, being on the other side, it's a cat and mouse game between the sharps and the really sharp bookmakers. And, that was so much of Billy's life.
Well, Frank had called me up a couple of months ago and told me that you had written the Billy Walters stuff. First of all, he asked me, have you ever heard of Billy Walters?
I asked you that 2 years ago when we were promoting the Tiger book, and Armen was writing it, and Armen was not willing to talk about it at that time. He couldn't talk about it at that time. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, he had asked me, did you ever hear of Billy Walters? I said, Billy Walters? Yeah, I mean, every bookmaker's heard of Billy Walters. I mean, who has heard of Billy Walters? What do you got to do with Billy Walters? And he told me you were writing the book. But the thing is, like you said, everybody was in search of Walters' information. Everybody wanted that game. It's like a lock. We call it a lock. It's a lock. Of course, the only lock is Yale, but it was a lock. So everybody wanted Walters' games, but of course, like you said, he had to disguise his picks because he ain't giving away the information for free. He's not an idiot, the right guy. So what they would do is, from my understanding, of course, I don't have the info that you have because you've written the biography and interviewed the guy a million times. You know him. I only know him as a legend, but on a Monday, say Dallas is 3 points over the Giants. Well, he might really like the Giants, but he'll send out seed money with 100 guys to say bet Dallas. So now,
yes,
a lot of money comes out on Monday, which you can move a line easily on Monday. You can't move a line too easily on Sunday because there's so much money bet already. It might take $2 million to move a line on Sunday, but on Monday, you can move a line with a little bit amount of money. Now, if you say he sends out 100,000 in seed money, I'm just throwing out a number, and he really likes the Giants, but he bets Dallas -3. That's going to go to 3.5 automatically because it's early and people are going to move the line to protect themselves. Now you throw on top of it, by the way, this is a Billy Walters game. Now it's going to go to 4, 4.5. Now, if he really likes it, he can come in on the other end on Sunday and buy the Giants plus 4.5.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, too, what I learned in talking to him and interviewing is, and you know this, there's certain value to certain numbers. The number 3 is 8% of the time from 1974 through 2022. The winning team landed on the number 3. 8%. It's it's far and away the most valuable number in professional football. And you can add up, like it's 3, 7, 10, 14, 17, 21, 24. And Billy would purposely, as you said, Billy, he would bet the other side of the game, trying to push the number to 7 or to 3. And then he would come, he might spend $75,000 in a very public way to say he was taking the underdog when he really wanted the favorite. But the line would go in the direction that he wanted, and then he would bet $500,000 on the game at the number he really wanted. And when we talk about it in the book, in his heavy, that pro football, college basketball weekends, he was wagering. His gross wagers were $20 million a day. $20 million a day.
Wow.
So think about that. He would wager in a betting season, gross wagers of $1 billion several times, during his career.
Hey, let me ask you.
So, those are mind-boggling kind of numbers to me.
Mind-boggling.
Let me go back. How did Billy grow up, and how did he get into this? Because I understand he was very poor growing up in Kentucky, and he was pitching pennies and started hustling at a young age.
Oh, it's. I think, to me, regardless of whether you care about sports betting or not, Billy's personal story is so fascinating. He was born when he was 18 months old. He was born in Mumfordville, Kentucky, which is rural Kentucky. Very, very Baptist, very religious farming community. His father was 41 years old when he died. Billy was 18 months old when his father died, Thurman Walters, a gambler. So Billy had gambling in his blood. His mom was 25. And by the time Billy was born, he was the third of 3 children. The mother kind of hightailed it out of Mumfordville to Louisville, leaving Billy in the hands, all 3 children in the hands of different relatives, Billy in the hands of his grandmother, who was really a savior in Billy's life, and one of the 2 people other than Billy's wife now of almost 47 years, Susan, who the book is dedicated to. Grandmother worked 2 jobs. They lived in a home that had no running water and had a cistern out back and had an outhouse out back. By the time Billy was, his first babysitter, really true babysitter, was his Uncle Harry, who owned the Q&R pool hall in downtown Mumfordville. So Billy, at the age of 4, Uncle Harry was babysitting for him. He stuck a pool cue in his hand, put him up on 2 Coke boxes, and didn't even bother to turn the light on, and said, have some fun back there. So Billy's playing pool at the age of 4. By the time he's 9, he's hustling pool at the Q&R. He's known as the Kid. And there's a great scene in the book where this one hotshot out-of-towner comes into the pool hall and they're playing 9-ball, and all he's got left is a 9-ball to win the game against Billy for $20. And Billy talks about choke points. And as a young gambler and hustler, he learned early on to gauge what a person's choke point was. And he thought this guy's choke point was $100. At that time, Billy was a paper boy. He was delivering 2 newspapers 6 days a week, 7 days a week. So he reaches into his pocket where all the money was that he had collected for the paper route. It's got a rubber band around it. He doesn't know how much money is there, but he knows it's more than $100. He reaches in. It's a great scene in the book. And he just tosses it on the table, and I say it hits with a thud that quiets the room. And the guy goes, he goes, I bet you that much you can't make the shot. And the guy goes, what do you mean? It's a 9-ball. It's an easy shot, corner shot. He goes, well, you never know until you do it. And so sure enough, the guy misses the shot. The Railbirds all, cheer Billy on because they were betting on Billy. And so by the time he's 10, he's hustling pool. He's a paper boy. He's cutting lawns and he's shining shoes. He's got a tremendous work ethic, instilled by his grandmother, but also part of Billy's DNA. He gets, by the time he's in high school, he's been working a morning job at a donut shop. He's working at after school at a Shell station. first girl he ever dates and kisses in high school, he gets pregnant. At 17, he becomes a dad as a senior in high school, or junior in high school, excuse me, at 17. And they get married. And so he's working all these jobs. He realizes that, he graduates from high school, fulfilling a promise that he had made to his grandmother. And by the time he's 19, he's selling used cars, and he's the most successful used car salesman in the history of the state of Kentucky. He sells $57,000 worth of used cars in 1 year in terms of that was his commission, which is about $550,000 in today's dollars. And he's spending every last dollar of that and more gambling every night after he gets off playing pool, in pitching pennies, nickels against the line, betting. He's at the track, anything. He's playing poker, anything and everything. He's addicted. He doesn't know it yet, but he's addicted to gambling. By the time he's 23, he's divorced from his first wife, Sharon. He's married his second wife, Carol, and he's 23 years old, and he's got 3 children at 23 years old, and he's still hustling cars. Now he's got a wholesale car business. He becomes a fantastically successful wholesale car guy, but he's burning through all that money too, because what used to be $100 bets are now $1,000 bets. And so the fact that he was able to survive those early years before he went to Vegas, and even before he goes to Vegas, his last gasp to try to make more money is he becomes a bookmaker, and he becomes a big bookmaker in Louisville. At 21, he's the biggest gambler in Louisville. By 28 or 9, he's the biggest bookmaker in Louisville. And he gets busted, and he's 32 years old. I think 36, excuse me. 82, 46. No, yeah, 36. He's 36 years old. He has a son who has a brain tumor that should have killed him. It didn't. A big story about that in the book. But he's not only addicted to gambling, but he's got a big time drinking problem. So his attorney says to him in Louisville, Billy, you got 2 choices. You either stop booking or you got to get out of town. So where does he go? The only place in America where gambling is legal at the time is to Las Vegas in 1982, September of 1982, when Vegas was all mobbed up. And we say in the book, I mean, what are the odds that somebody who is, addicted to gambling and has got a big time alcohol problem goes to a city that eats addicts for lunch and dreams for dinner, right? Las Vegas.
Addicts for lunch and dreams for dinner, huh?
That's great.
Dreams for dinner. But he goes there and he works with a computer group, and he gets sober the age of 40, 41, changes his life. A great scene about how that happened. And he becomes fabulously successful because he starts hanging out with some of the biggest rounders in the world: Doyle Brunson, Billy Baxter, Bobby Baldwin, Stewie Younger, Chip Reese, probably the best poker player in the world at that time. They're teaching him how to gamble and poker and backgammon and other ones, and he's teaching them because now Billy's got a new addiction. He's golf, and he's a world class. He's a world class golf hustler. He's playing golf matches for $400,000 over 18 holes.
Let me back you up.
Presses.
Let me back you up, Armen. I heard Billy say somewhere that the first year that he was going to be a professional gambler, he lost $1 million.
Oh yeah, he lost $1 million. They're nice. They were nice when he would gamble at the Horseshoe, and he'd walk in that casino at night with $1 million in his bankroll, and he'd walk out of that casino not only have lost $1 million, but another $200,000 in credit. So he'd come home and tell Susan, how did we do? Oh, not so good. I lost $1 million plus another couple $100,000 in credit. And Susan, who is a ever-loving saint, I've met her many, many times. She is a saint with a capital S. She said to Bill, and she's always believed in Billy. She's been a partner in his life, and she's a wonderful character in the book and a wonderful person in person. She'd go, "That's all right, Billy, you'll make it back." And sure as shit, the next day he'd be on the golf course, and there'd be like the biggest drug dealer in the world, a guy like Jimmy Chagra, who was the biggest marijuana dealer, who had made Las Vegas his second home. And he played Jimmy Chagra in a golf match, and he'd win $300,000 or $400,000 off of Jimmy Chagra. He'd play in another couple of guys, and by the end of the week, he had won the $1 million back, and then some. But until he met Chip Reese, Chip's passed away, but Billy said he was the best money manager he'd ever seen in his life. And Chip was many times the World Series of Poker champion, a phenomenal world-class poker player, but he taught Billy discipline, and that discipline in his sports gambling bled over into discipline in business and discipline eventually in his investment strategies. One thing I've learned about Billy, I've done books with, Frank, thanks to you, George Lopez, Mike Singletary, Catfish Hunter. I collaborated with all those people. Billy took this collaboration to an entirely different level. He was the most invested of anyone I've ever worked with in a book. He probably read the manuscripts, different versions of the manuscripts, at least a dozen times. And on 2 occasions, I sat with him in his house in Rancho Santa Fe, where we literally went over every word of every line in the book to ad nauseum, to a point. But he's a perfectionist, and I think the book, it took a lot of work to get it to where it is. It's still, I'm looking at it right here. Here it is. You can see it. That's the cover.
Yeah.
It's called Gambler, Secrets from a Life at Risk. And they're, what is it? It's 356 pages. And I don't think there's a word in here that Billy didn't look at 50 times to make sure it was the right word for him. So that kind of discipline and that kind of perfectionism, the people that have read the book, it's coming out soon, it's reflective of Billy's obsessiveness with wanting it to be perfect.
Bobby Riggs told me once, Bobby Riggs was a famous tennis player and a great golf hustler. He told me about golf. He says, you want to make money in golf? It's not about how good you negotiate. It's not about how good you play. It's about how you negotiate the handicap. Everything is negotiating the handicap.
You say that, it's so funny. There's a Bobby Riggs story in here because he was hustling at La Costa, and Billy played him at La Costa, and Riggs thought he was going to, hustle Billy, and Billy took him for, what was it? I think up 1,600 the first day and 1,700 the next day, and Riggs Riggs had a reputation as a cheater. He would play with his brother, and his brother would drive the cart with him, and so much of this is like dropping balls,
hitting a
play it where it lays,
hitting a
balls.
Hitting a
and
title.
Billy took him 2 days straight, and
you're saying Bobby?
It took a while before Riggs paid him.
You say Bobby Riggs would hit a Titleist into the woods and a top flight out?
Yeah, exactly. He'd be playing a top flight on the way out, but it was a Titleist going in.
Yeah. So you talk about La Costa. In 1986 or 1985, I was down in La Costa doing something with Rod Carew, and I walked in. You've been a San Diego guy. You'll appreciate this. I walked into the clubhouse after we played golf, and there was Smokey Gaines of Arizona State basketball game and Michael Jordan. And they invited me out to play golf for another 18 holes of golf. I quickly ran the other way.
Yeah. Well, there's stories of Billy where he would negotiate the match on the first tee for as much as 45 minutes. He would let other people play through, tee off, while he was still there, negotiating what the bet was going to be. And, he had the ability, because he really, Billy, and this is something that somebody told me, and we didn't put it in the book because Billy didn't want to brag about it, but Jack Binion told me this, and he said, Billy's got balls the size of grapefruits. And he has no fear on the golf course or betting or in business. He has taken risks, and that's why the subtitle is Secrets from a Life at Risk. This man has put more money and more of himself on the line in situations where no normal human being would think once, let alone 100 times, whether they should take the bet or not. But that's Billy. I mean, he is, as I said, I've never seen anybody like him. And, the guy's been indicted 6 times. The government was after him with the computer group. He beat the government on a bookmaking charge. There's a big chapter about that. It's fascinating. The links that the government in 1985 went after the computer group. The trial didn't start until 1990 when they re-indicted him 2 weeks before the statute of limitations were going to expire. Big chapter about that, how he beat the government. And from then on, the government had Billy in their crosshairs. And then, as a lot of people know, he was involved in an insider trading case, reputed to be insider trading with Carl Icahn and Phil Mickelson, which turned out to be complete bullshit, that the government had manufactured those charges. And it actually, and we have it in the book and it's documented, the lead FBI agent in the case, a white-collar crime unit in the Southern District, repeatedly leaked secret grand jury testimony to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times in order to write stories about Carl and Billy and Phil. And turned out that they didn't, Carl didn't get indicted, Phil didn't get indicted, Billy got indicted on 10 charges of insider trading. Chapter about that, lost the case. And at the age of 71, imagine that, is sentenced to 5 years in prison, goes into federal prison camp Pensacola. There's 2 big chapters about that, what it was like at 71 to go into a federal prison. Eventually got clemency from President Trump. But, I mean, you talk about a life. I could have stopped Billy's life 4 or 5 times and just said, okay, that's a normal life, or not a normal life, but that's a life you could write about. Here, it just keeps going. You're like, oh, God, that's right, you got indicted. And oh, that's right, you went to prison. And oh, you got out. And oh, now you're doing, which is amazing. What he did in prison, there's some of my favorite chapters to write. He mentored a lot of these men in prison that just basically grew up on the wrong side of the street, had no chance to be successful. And he ends up doing things for these men that helps change their life, getting them jobs when they got out, and some of them on a COVID release. But now he's spending several $1 million with something called Hope for Prisoners in Las Vegas and in Nevada, to give prisoners, con men who are coming out, an opportunity to have a second chance in life.
And he had long been a Las Vegas philanthropist prior to 71.
Oh yeah, Opportunity Village, which does things for people that are mentally and intellectually disabled, because his son Scott is one of those people. Billy has raised tens of millions of dollars, donated and raised tens of millions of dollars. And there's a chapter called Land of Opportunity in the book, which details, how Billy got involved and how he got, and people were able to get Celine Dion and her husband involved, Renee. He's done wonders in that city. And, to me, he's like an American original. He's a bit of an American outlaw, but he's an outlaw with a great heart. And, I think he talks about having a servant's heart. And, when you meet your maker, it's really about what have you done in your life? How many people have you helped? And I think by the time you get to the end of the book, you think, the rewards of Billy Walters' life have far outweighed the risks, and to me, that's there's parts of the book where Billy's not a very likable person because he's not a great father and he's not a great husband. He's so focused on gambling and addicted to gambling and making money. And he sees being a good husband as just being there financially for his family. He doesn't know that, time is the most precious thing you can give to your family and to your children. And it takes him a long time to learn that. And it's only because of Susan that he eventually comes to that realization. But, most men that have been through what Billy's been through would have been dead and gone a long time ago. And the fact that 77, he's still very healthy and still gambling and putting his money where his mouth is and where his head is just, to me, is just remarkable.
It occurred to me that, that you just talked about the family and, when you're a gambler, of course, it's an all-consuming compulsion. It's like being an alcoholic. It's like being a drug addict. There's no difference. I mean, you don't take a vacation from being a compulsive gambler. So a lot of guys that bookmakers, they make a lot of money. Poker players, they make a lot of money, and they give it back on the tables because they're going to go someplace else and gamble. That's what they do. That's what gamblers do. They gamble. But you talked about being a provider. That's how you can justify it to yourself. You say, okay, yeah, I'm out there gambling all the time, 24/7, but I'm doing it for you. I'm doing this for you. This is to provide. I'm a provider. I pay the bills. And
that's exactly right, Billy. That was his philosophy.
That was my philosophy. Don't break my balls.
That was his mindset. I think his mindset is probably a better word. If I'm providing for you, then I'm a good father and I'm a good husband. And his first wife, they were so young when they got married at 17. Literally got married on the day that John F. Kennedy was shot in Dallas. And, we sort of say was the metaphor, for what was going to happen, the darkness that was going to be part of their marriage. That marriage didn't last terribly long. And then he was married 9 years to Carol. And I interviewed Carol. I interviewed about 60 other people for this book. Over time, you learn that the more people that you interview, that you can bring their recollections and their details to scenes and conversation, that's when a book really comes to life. And Carol said it. She goes, I begged him time and time and time again to just quit. We had enough money. He was making money in the car business. But Billy just couldn't stop. That was the way his mind was wired. And it wasn't really until he had stopped drinking and he had one night where he went back into the Horseshoe, and Teddy Binion was there, the younger son of Benny Binion, who's an incredible character in the book, who built and started the original Horseshoe. And Teddy cut the limits. Billy was at a blackjack table betting $50,000 a hand, and he cut the limits on Billy, and Billy was drunk enough to say some stuff, throw some chips and say some things that basically in those days was like asking for a one-way trip to the desert. And got tossed out of the Horseshoe, and there's a scene where he wakes up the next morning realizing what he had said about the Binion family. I interviewed Jack Binion, and Jack was funny. He told Billy, Billy, that's okay. I've seen and heard worse over time. But Jack was downplaying because Teddy went after Billy, and there's a description in the book. Teddy had a gun, and he was looking for some revenge with Billy at that point in time. And Billy, to his credit, got out of Dodge. But he realized the next morning he had made a mistake. And from that night on, he never drank again. And that was the moment, cold turkey, pivotal. And that's when, from that point on, because the computer group was crushing it and Billy was moving all their money around the country, he was their big mover. He was the guy that was laying off all their money around the country. And, he had money in his pocket, and he had Chip helping him with money management. And then he started to go into the investment business during the savings and loan crisis, started to buy shopping centers and started to buy apartment buildings and started to really build up a portfolio that led to the golf business. You know, at one time, I think he had 7 golf courses in Las Vegas. And, you know, that's another pretty funny part of the book because, you know, Billy's a businessman and, you know, Vegas is a place where it's an interesting place to do business, to say the least. And so it's fun to write about Billy's business mentality because it's a lot like being on a golf course with Billy. You know, he's gonna be prepared, and if he can hustle you a little bit on the deal, he's gonna hustle you. But he's also gonna hold his people accountable, and customer service to him was number one. So that's a reason he did so well in the automotive business too, because he really believed that, you know, customer service was the primary thing to make sure that his customers were taken care of.
Armen, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to shift a little bit. We're both spent some time in San Diego. How have your impressions of Phil changed? Phil Mickelson changed before and after your Tiger Woods book, and then before and after your Billy Walters book?
That's a really good question. I kind of skipped over to what the headlines are going to be here pretty soon. Is, you know, Billy and Phil knew each other as friends. They golfed together and friends for 8 years. And they were big time betting partners for 5 years. And I'm talking, you know, millions and millions and millions of dollars they bet, a 50-50 betting partnership they had for 5 years. My impressions of Phil were like a lot of people, I think, that really don't know Phil other than watching him on television. On the positive side, he's one of the most hospitable and outgoing and caring people with fans of anybody I've ever seen.
Is that a put on? Is that a put on though?
I don't know, Frank. All I know is what I witnessed is he does that, you know, and that takes time and it takes effort.
Sure.
And whether that's part of the facade, I don't know. I had great respect for Phil as a golfer because he was the one that I think Tiger feared the most. Because he doesn't have a lot of fear with him on the golf course either. Now, my opinion of Phil has changed dramatically. I like the fact that Bill made clear in the book he was not going to talk at all about Phil's personal life, and I think that's a really smart idea. But they were partners for 5 years, and there's some scenes here. One scene where Billy was making bets for Phil. He wasn't booking them, but he was making them on Phil's behalf on games that he was either didn't care about or was neutral on, because Phil wanted more action than Billy wanted to have at that point in time, which tells you something. There's some very specific numbers in Phil, to our everlasting love, admitted that was addicted, his word. He had an addiction to gambling, sports gambling, for over a long period of time. There's some very specific numbers that we have in the book as just how addicted Phil was, and they're mind-boggling, honestly.
7 figures, 8 figures?
He was betting during one 4-year period from 2010 to 2014. He made just on 110 to win 100 and 220 to win 200. His gross wagers were $311 million. Gross. 311 million.
That's Mickelson's.
That's Mickelson.
Wow.
311 million. And that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of Phil's addiction. But the more important thing was, and this is where Billy and Phil's friendship fractured, was Billy wanted Phil to testify for him in court or make a public statement, because the illusions were that Billy had given Phil inside information on Dean Food stock in order to pay off a gambling debt to Billy. So Billy passed inside information. Phil made a couple of made a series of bets or investment in trades in Dean Foods, then sold the stock quickly after there was a White Wave organic food spinoff, made more than $1 million and used that $1 million to pay off a debt to Billy Walters, which is complete, utter bullshit. And it's documented in the book that it's bullshit. All Billy wanted to do, Phil to do, was to tell the public or in open court what he on 2 occasions told the FBI. Billy Walters never gave me material non-public information, insider information on anything. But, and as we explain in detail in the book, Phil had other problems. He was in the midst of a money laundering investigation because he was having other people pay off wire money on his behalf, or money that he had sent to them to pay off gambling debts offshore. And there was a money laundering investigation. So Phil took the fifth, was never charged. And, you know, when you're Billy Walters, when you tell other people that you will do what Billy had asked you to do, which was to testify or make a statement on Billy's behalf, which Billy believes would have made all the difference in the world in him becoming, of not being convicted on those 10 insider trading charges, it fractured their friendship. And so what I like about the book is that there's no name calling in here, and there's no real settling of scores. There's hard facts. There's documented information. When I say that the government leaked secret grand jury testimony, I'm not making that up. That's the government in a ex parte letter to the judge that was involved in Billy's insider trading case, sending the judge a 12-page letter where the government admitted that this guy, David Chavez, the FBI agent, repeatedly leaked secret grand jury testimony to 2 of the nation's leading newspapers in an attempt to create a scenario to help indict Billy Walters. So I say that because the book isn't just about sports gambling. It's about an extraordinary life and the degree in which the federal government went to try to end this guy's life. I mean, literally. They didn't want to just put him in prison. They wanted to bury him. And the fact that he's still standing is remarkable. And the fact that he's still, I think, one of the most honorable men I've ever met in my life, is just it's an amazing American story. And, you know, Simon & Schuster is the publisher. Only one publisher looked at the proposal. And Simon & Schuster, the same editor that did the Tiger Woods book for us, Jofi Ferrari Adler, at Avid Reader, read the proposal and took the book off the table, made a very, very big bid advance on the book. And that tells you something about, you know, the overarching arc of the story of Billy's life.
Let me ask you a question that Billy asked me. How did you get involved with Billy Walters?
It's an interesting story. If I could go back to the beginning, I would say when I was at Sports Illustrated in March of 1986, we did a 32-page special report, Sports Gambling in America. I was the lead reporter on that, investigative reporter, writer reporter. I wrote a piece about Art Schleister, remember?
Art
you know,
Schleister.
I remember that. I remember that episode. I watched that episode.
The Olympia Gold Bowl, in Art's addiction to gambling. And I still have that file. I still have that magazine. I still have the computer group file because the computer group was one of the sidebars in the 32-page special report. Billy Walters' name is all over all the reporting in that piece that Robert Boyle wrote, but Billy's name never shows up in the magazine. So there's a guy named Glenn Bunting who is a strategic communications guy, an expert, has a lot of big-time clients. We ran across each other journalistically when he was representing Baylor in a sex assault scandal there, and I was doing a major piece for 60 Minutes Sports. So Glenn and I reconnected on that. And then he calls me up in the summer of 2020 and he goes, do you know a guy named Billy Walters? And I went, Billy Walters? You mean the computer group Billy Walters? He goes, exactly. I said, oh yeah, I know Billy Walters. In fact, I have a file in which his name is all over it. So Glenn said, he's looking for somebody to collaborate with. We think he would be great. Would you like to talk to him? I said, I'd love to talk to him. So we talked, and Billy hired me to write 2 sample chapters, and I did that in June and in July of 2020. Billy really liked what I wrote. I took a month off, and in September of 2020, I started to work on the book. And literally from September of 2020 until April of 2023, I was still making changes and additions based on, like, even when Liv and the PGA Tour announced their so-called merger, we were able to get a little bit of that, a line or two, into the book right before it went to the printer. So, you know, this has been my life for the last, in large part, for the last 3 years. And it's been an incredible experience. You know, we did this a little differently. Billy paid me to write the book, and then we took it out to the publishers. So we had a finished product, which was, I think, crucial in getting the kind of advance that we were able to get, and that Billy was able to get for his story. And so yeah, it was by happenstance, honest to God. You know, it's one of those things where the phone rings and, you know, do you know Billy Walters? And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I do know Billy Walters.
35 years later, that 1980,
35 years later,
that 1986 article really paid off. And what are you doing?
It did.
You're doing another book now?
I am. It's called The Price. It's kind of like the System 2.0.
Right.
And it's a deep dive into the state of big-time college football. And you can only imagine, as of, you know, what's just happened with the destruction of the Pac-12 and the realignment craziness that with Arizona State and Utah going to the Big 12 and Oregon and Washington bolting for the Big 10. The NIL portal, NCAA, Congress with NIL bills. It's been I'm up to my neck in it right now. I'm working with a guy named John Talty, who was the former senior sports editor at AL.com, which is the primary source of news in the state of Alabama and the SEC. And John's now at 24/7 Sports, a senior writer there covering college football. So we've been working on that since the first of the year, and it's coming out next August. HarperCollins is publishing it. And then, you know, I'm involved with the streaming world on a couple of projects. And Frank, you and I talked yesterday. If I had a gun and one bullet around here, I'd probably kill myself right now. Just dealing with all the stuff that even somebody at my level, which is not a very high level, has to deal with. But I'm busy enough. You know, the books, I think, have really been good to me. Imagine and Netflix are in the process of finalizing a deal with us for, which I probably shouldn't say anything about. I probably shouldn't say that. Should have said that. But you know, that's on the agenda. So I just celebrated my 70th birthday, and I feel like I'm working hard, but I'm working happy at this point in my life.
That's great.
How many books are under your belt right now, Armen? I'm sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
How many books are 11, 12? How many books have you written?
This is Billy is 12. The Price would be 13. And honest to God, I never, Frank, you remember, I go back to my first book was with
Dave Peck.
when I was with Frank at the PR firm in San Diego. Frank was my boss, and the Phillips organization, and I was involved with Echelon, and Dave Peck and Mike Yellen were the two superstars for Echelon, along with what was it? Adams, right?
Jerry Halisher.
Yeah, and what's the girl's name? Lynn Adams.
Lynn
right?
Adams.
Lynn Adams.
Jennifer Harding.
Yeah, all of them. Echelon had them all.
Rita Hoff, who by the way, do you remember Rita Hoff?
Yes.
She married Joe West.
Did she really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Yep.
Well, my first one, Billy, was a racquetball instructional book with Dave Peck that I got paid the grand total of $3,000 to do, and I almost had to, beat the guy over the head that was his agent to get the money out of him. So, that was the first one. I'm making a little more now than $3,000.
That's right. Let's get back to the price.
Yes.
It appears to me that NCAA has no clout over football anymore. That now college football is run by the TV executives. Would you agree with that?
Totally. I think the NCAA really, it's becoming increasingly clear, and it doesn't take a Phi Beta Kappa to figure it out. Their whole existence right now is based on March Madness. They get paid $1 billion a year from Turner and CBS for basically 3 weeks of the tournament. That pays all the bills, keeps the lights on in Indianapolis, and money goes out to the schools, in a certain proportion. College football has long since separated from the NCAA in terms of, they have no control over the money. They really don't have any control. They don't have any control of the college playoffs. And very, very soon, I don't think they're going to have any control over anything in terms of college football, because the idea of these super conferences separating themselves, and what we're hearing, repeatedly is, don't be surprised if there isn't some, like the AFC, NFC of college football, and you've got 32 teams that are going to be the superpowers that are going to be playing for the big money and for the college football playoff money, which is in 2024, what was $1 billion in money that was going to the schools and to the athletic departments is going to be $2 billion. So you wonder why what's going on is going on right now. Everybody's looking at that pot of gold and saying, okay, what do I have to do in order to have a shot at making the playoffs? And when you throw in, when you toss NIL, name, image, and likeness, athletes now being able to use and make money on their name, image, and likeness, that was like a neutron bomb, a nuclear bomb that went off at a time in which college football was really pretty quiet in terms of
changed everything,
of conferences and things. But now it's
changed everything.
Wild West.
It is, and they have no regulation over that. That's why Congress is trying to legislate as ineffective as.
You got 38 state laws, Frank, now that are everybody's got their own state law. I've been talking to Blumenthal's people, and our reporting has taken us. I've been very, very close with Bobby Robbins, the president of the University of Arizona, who has become, some people say, the most powerful person in college football right now, maybe college sports, because he's a former cardiac surgeon, a thoracic cardiac surgeon, super smart guy, loves sports. His heart's in the right place, big thinker, solution-minded. And, this is going to be a mess. People have been telling me it's going to take 3 to 5 years before this thing settles down. And
I'm telling you, it goes right down to the high school level, because when LeBron James's son is no, not Bronny, Bryce. Bryce starts at Sierra Canyon, then he's going to transfer to Campbell Hall, and now he's transferred again before he even started at Campbell Hall to Notre Dame Sherman Oaks. It's crazy. It's crazy because it's all about name, image, and likeness. And,
there's numbers now that we're hearing for the top 5-star recruits, quarterbacks, the game changers in certain programs. the numbers are $8 million over 4 years, $2 million a year in NIL money to come to a school.
Yeah, Bronny's making that. Bronny's making $8 million a year. Reportedly making $8 million a year now, and now he may not be able to play.
Yeah, it's look, you open it. I was part of this conference in Washington about a month ago where President Robbins brought all these people together for the Future of College Sports Summit, and I got asked to speak during the lunch period just to kind of Q&A and stuff. And one of the things I've said is, the NCAA, you reap what you sow. I'm very close to Sonny Vaccaro. I'm very familiar with the Ed O'Bannon case. The NCAA in the Alston case, and now there's a Johnson case. The NCAA had opportunity time and time again to come to some sort of logical, reasonable solutions for athletes to get paid. And they fought it to the tune of tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of legal fees over the years. And this is the result of it. When the Supreme Court rules 9-0 in favor of the athletes in NIL and basically calls the NCAA a cartel, which they did, a cartel,
Wow.
then you've got problems. And what happens is what happened at Texas A&M, which was really sort of the fuse that lit the bomb, is when you take these schools that have administrations, coaches, and boosters who want nothing to do but win and have the capability and the financial ability to back it, then you've got the next phase of the athletic industrial arms race. It's no longer about your locker room. It's no longer about your weight room. It's no longer about your nutrition. It's no longer about anything. It's about how much money can you put together to buy yourself a team. And when you let the reins off on something like that, the result is what we're seeing right now. And then you add in the television money and that carrot, it's
so big, Armen, that I don't have to tell you this, but it's so big that the women's this year, when they Pac-10, when UCLA and USC go into the Big 12, the Big 16, whatever it's going to be called, that's only football and basketball. What about the golf teams, the women's tennis teams, the women's soccer teams that have to travel all of these places to cross country? Football.
You hit the nail right on the head.
Football is going to pay for those costs for the non-revenue producing sports.
They're going to pay for the cost to travel, but they're not going to pay the cost. I think the mental health cost for these athletes, the non-revenue athletes, is going to far exceed whatever the financial cost is.
And absolutely, and the educational cost, because those kids are going to be away from school for so long.
Imagine being a lacrosse team and have to go from Rutgers to Eugene, right, and then fly back. Or you do a swimming team that's got to go cross country. I think the long-term effect of this realignment and this desperate move into these conferences by some of these schools, it's going to be incalculable in terms of the mental health crisis and the cost to the student athlete. And, that's about the last thing these college presidents were thinking about when they made these decisions to break up the Pac-12. And it's almost like, you're at a poker table and there's a big, huge pot in the middle of the table, and that's the television money, and you're deciding, do I take a seat at that table or not? And they're looking at one thing. They're looking at the potential payout in what are called grant of rights, the media rights. And you're absolutely right. I was talking to John Talty about it yesterday, and it's something we both brought up, is, well, what about these poor kids that, it's tough enough being a Division I college athlete, the pressures that are associated with that. And then you throw in name, image, and likeness and building your brand and trying to compete and stay on the field and not get injured and go to school and get a degree. And then you have to travel across 2,400 miles back and forth to play a game. and make on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday, it makes no sense.
It's crazy.
But
and it's
that's the reality.
It's crazy. And the reality's got
It is now. I think what you're going to see, Frank and Billy, is you're going to see football split away completely. And those other non-revenue sports, swimming, gymnastics, lacrosse, they're going to become either Olympic sports. They're going to get funded by the Olympic teams or the Olympic organizations, or you're going to see them just some other way maybe get regionalized in a way where they don't have to travel as much anymore, because I just don't think it's sustainable. I really don't.
I tell you that in 2011, I was fortunate enough to coach the number one women's girls soccer team in high school in America. Now, with name, image, and likeness, our school decided that they didn't want to participate in that. We got 3 schools on our conference that we can't compete with anymore.
Wow.
I mean, and one of them Sierra Canyon and one of them Harvard Westlake, because they've got big name, image, and likeness programs because they want to be number one in their nation. And, when you got Pippen's kid going there, when you got LeBron's kid going there, what chance does a little Catholic school in La Cañada have competing against those teams and those name, image, and likeness deals? So it's pretty bad.
Yeah.
And it's worked its way down to high school, and it's now working its way down to junior high school.
Yeah.
So
when you wrote the system, that was what year did you write that? That's pretty much
came out, I think,
the
2000
big time college football, right? The inequity between the big schools and the small schools.
Yeah, that was the beginning of realignment, and regional television networks were coming in. The Big Ten network, the SEC network, the ACC network was still to come. But that was the first time that some outside money was coming into the system for these grant of rights, the media rights, and then you had coaching salaries which were soaring at the time. They look sort of pedestrian 10 years later, some of these numbers, when you have coaches making north of $10 million a year. So that was really the first deep dive into the state of college football, and that was 2013 that came out. And so 10 years later, that looks like child's play compared to what we're dealing with right now.
And when we were growing up in the 70s, those football coaches that were making $10 million a year, they would have been called gym coaches, gym teachers.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll tell you something else too. The book, The Price, we like the title because it's not just about the money that's been pouring into big time college sports and particularly big time college football, or pouring into coaching salaries, or pouring into the new Michigan State just announced recently that their new football facility is $78 million. It's staggering to me that those kind of numbers are being tossed around. But it's also the emotional and the physical price that not only the players are the coaches are paying. Coaching big time college football and big time college basketball right now is a full-time job, because you have these windows for the portal where kids in the spring and in December, March and in December, they have a window where they can decide whether they want to stay in your program or leave your program, which has never happened before. So now you have to recruit the kids back into your program. And meanwhile, if you're trying to fill spots in your program, you now have directors of player personnel in college football programs that never existed before, who do nothing but look at the portal all day long to see what players might be available, how many snaps they have, what school do they play at, what is the possibility of them helping your program. And it's kind of turned college football on its head. There's no dead period anymore for these coaches, which is the reason that coaches like Jay Wright, that just decided to get out of the game. They don't want to deal with it anymore. And the other thing that has happened is athletic directors, 50-year-old, 60-year-old athletic directors, they don't know how to deal with this. So they've left the sport. Compliance people, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a compliance person now when you have, at a single school, you have 400 athletes, but you've got 80 athletes that are on a Division I football team that are on scholarship, and they're all trying to build their brand, and they're doing NIL deals, and you're trying to determine whether those NIL deals are legit and are okay to sign under the circumstances of what the university allows, and then what the state allows, and then what the NCAA is going to come in and say, oh no, that's not good. What your relationship is with the collectives. It's an avalanche right now, an emotional avalanche for these people, and a lot of people are getting buried under it. And I think that's part of what John and I have really become fascinated with is, it's not just the financial price, it's the personal price that people are paying.
Yeah,
and that's where I think it's never been as bad as it is right now.
Let me bring this full circle, because the TV controls it, because TV's got the money, but the money is coming from, bringing full circle, gambling. I truly believe the popularity of sports is based on the people that are gambling, the people that are throwing millions and gazillions of dollars into the sport. And that's why people are trying to build their brands, build their programs. They build.
Well, the NFL ratings have never been higher at a time in which, you would say some of their teams, they're not, some of the games are not the easiest to watch.
And the NFL has hired a full-time czar of gambling.
Oh yeah. Hypocritical would not even begin to describe the NFL's stance on sports betting. I mean, Pete Rozelle and Roger Goodell have been on the record stating that it was a worst case scenario for the league. Well, once it became legal through the Supreme Court ruling,
they embraced it.
It was Katie bar the door. Now there's 38 states where sports gambling is legal. You have DraftKings and FanDuel and Caesars and Fanatics and all these other people getting involved in it. Last year alone, because I know from the book, it's in the book, sports gambling, legalized sports gambling in this country was a $100 billion a year business. That's billion, with a B.
Yeah, but
I'm
sorry, not that that's legal.
That's legalized. That's people that have to pay taxes on.
Illegal is much more than that. It's not even close because, you'll never – I used to crack me up. People, they advertise bookmakers. Now, I was a bookmaker. They advertise it now on television. Obviously, all these it's crazy. But just think about it. Why legal gambling will never replace illegal gambling is because you got to put up the money when you bet legally. When you bet illegally, you don't got to put up the money. You're calling a bookie. You can mention any number you want. And if I'm a sick gambler, I could have 10 bookies. So you could put a limit on me and say, okay, you can't lose more than $10,000 this week, Billy. That's fine. I got 10 bookies. And it just depends on who I'm more afraid of that I'm going to pay first. So there's no limit to what.
Well, Billy, here's a question for you. And this is something that because I live in Connecticut and I see, and I'm aware of we have Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, the big casinos up there north of us, and the social consequences, the social debt that's being paid in bankruptcies and divorces, domestic abuse, and things like that. I think personally, we're just at the beginning of a tsunami of social problems that are going to follow legalized sports gambling in this country, because you now have it in the hands of 21-year-olds who are on their phone, or guys in their 30s or 40s, and their wife is saying to them, "Oh, who are you texting?" "Oh, I'm just texting my buddy. We're watching the game. I'm just giving him some crap or something." But he's making in-game bets, and you can do that now on virtually any sport of golf or the NFL or Major League Baseball. I'm more concerned about, and you probably saw it every single day as a bookmaker, guys who would lose businesses or jobs or problems at home. I'm just concerned when you have this many people now where it's legal 2 or 3 years from now, God knows what the social consequences are going to be.
I couldn't agree with you more. It's going to be, plus they're going after the kids with this fantasy football and stuff like that. That's all just a hook to get you start getting interested in gambling. I know more than the whole joy of it is right. I outsmarted this guy. I know more than the other guy. That's the whole joy of sports. And the conventional wisdom. I'm sorry, just the conventional wisdom used to be the less you bet, the more chances you have of winning. Of course, Walters threw that out the window. I mean, he was betting 40 games a day. I mean, which is like,
turned it on its head.
It's insane. You don't do that. You can't win like that. But, that's what he did. But again, the personal life, I mean, not only did he have a son that was intellectually challenged, he had a daughter that committed suicide, which is a tremendous.
When he was in prison, that's a moment. I mean, my God, Tanya,
that's the most horrible thing you could ever think of as a parent. It
was awful for Billy, and he still to this day tears up talking about it.
The repercussions to your home life and everything else, and then, like you said, it's gambling is compulsion, just like alcoholism, drugs, anything else. You're not going to meet many heroin addicts at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. You know what I mean? It narrows your world. So what happens is if you're a gambler and you want to have fun, you go someplace with gamblers to gamble.
Well, I think one of the things that Billy said that's really resonated with me is one, and this is like 101, and you know this, don't put all your money with one. Don't just bet with FanDuel. Don't just bet with DraftKings. Spread your money around. Look for the best. His whole thing is value, getting the best game at the best price.
And the
number
price.
two,
price.
The price
is everything. That's
value.
The number is everything. It's everything.
Value. And then number two was you have to be disciplined to Billy would never bet more than 3% of his bankroll on any given game. So figure it out. If your bankroll is $10,000, so your biggest bet is what? $300. You can only bet $300 on any particular game. And that's where you don't chase. You're not saying, oh, okay, I'll go big on this game. And his discipline, again, he's got a brain trust of people that he spends literally millions of dollars a year putting together. So his numbers and his factors are so deep and so refined. When he's looking for his power rating against the power rating of another team, but his basic tenets, which are in the first gambling chapter, are so clear. And if people that are out there read the book or want to learn about that, I don't think there's a better place to. I mean, this is like the Pope giving a sermon from the Vatican, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? There's nobody else. If you're talking about Catholicism, this is the guy I think that you won't listen to in terms of sports gambling, because to Billy, it's a science, and there's an art to it, and it's math. And that's where, when he's making a bet, it's a mathematical equation for Billy, and it's not done on emotion or a tip that he heard, at the barbershop. So I think that's, if I could say anything about what you would get out of those chapters, is it's a true masterclass. It's like a PhD in sports gambling from the one guy in the world that can really teach it, better than anybody.
Right. Derek, you got a question?
Yeah, I do. Okay. So first of all, I want to say that this is, I haven't spent as much time with you as Frank, but this is the most excited I've ever seen you in an interview, at least here on the Mick, Mook, and a Mike. You seem to be very excited about this book. So that's cool. The next thing is,
it's hard to get Frank excited. That sometimes I've seen so much there at studios in Hollywood.
The next question is, so this guy, Billy Walters, is he one of the smartest people you've ever encountered, spent time with?
Yes, he is. That's a very good question. And for a guy that barely graduated from high school, I mean, we're not talking about a guy that went to MIT,
Right.
I think street smarts and business smarts, as smart as anybody I've ever met in my life. And I've spent a lot of time around some very smart people in terms of coaches, athletes. But I think Billy's combination of brains and street smarts, preparation, he'll never go into a business meeting meeting without having practiced whatever the presentation is to the point where it's perfect.
Wow.
And I think that kind of obsessiveness, coming from a person who's rather obsessive, to me, when you take all of those things together, there's this alchemy there that I just have never seen before. That fearlessness combined with smarts, combined with a big set of balls, combined with a love of action. He's a charming as hell guy too. I mean, he can spin stories, and he's humble in the presence of other people. We went out to dinner not long ago with our best friends in San Diego. We were in Rancho Santa Fe, where Billy lives, and we went to a restaurant right on the water, and he was so charming, and Susan was so pleasant, and you'd never know that was the Billy Walters. That's one of the parts of Billy that's so appealing to me, is he doesn't wear his superstardom on his shoulders.
I was going to call him the Steve Jobs of bookmaking, but I don't think so.
I think that's a pretty good way to describe him. Yeah, he's a visionary, no question.
Yeah.
Billy, you got any final questions for Armen?
No, not really. I just I'm delighted you wrote the book. I mean, I'm going to read the book because Billy Walters has always been like mythical, a mythical character. If you know anything about gambling, definitely the Mount Rushmore, like you said, his name should be the only one up there. Yeah. But the price,
purposely too, Billy. Purposely, he kept it that way. He didn't want anybody to know anything about what he was doing. I mean, the links you'll see. He set up operations in Mexico, in Tijuana, and then moved out because they were getting extorted by the federales. He went to Camberley, England. From there, he went to the Bahamas, where they literally dug T1 lines across the island so he could bet, as fast as possible, and they would survive the hurricanes down there. And then from there, he went to Panama City, where he had a machine of sports gamblers, where he was betting, again, all around the world, 1,600 accounts. So part of that myth, I think, is revealed in the book, and part of that, his brilliance. There were times when I'm really literally writing the book, and I'm going, I can't believe I'm writing this. I can't believe he did this. I can't believe he took these kind of steps to do this. And then you're going, well, of course he did, because he's done it, 3 or 4 times in other places. But that's what he is.
I always said that the difference between truth and fiction, you can always tell what's truth and what's fiction, because fiction has to be believable. The truth doesn't. No one's going to write fiction that's not believable. But the truth, you read it and say, well, that can't be. Then you know it's on the level.
I'm going to close with a couple of thoughts, Armen. One of them is on August the 5th, Don Coryell was inducted into the Hall of Fame. We spent a lot of time with Coach Coryell in San Diego, and I was very glad to see that happen.
Oh, me too.
My second, and Hank Bauer has been a guest on the show. Hank's a great guy, as you know. My second comment was, what the hell did Sonny Vaccaro think of Matt Damon portraying him in a movie? There's never been two guys further from each other than Matt Damon and Sonny Vaccaro.
I think he was just channeling Sonny. That was the thing, the bravado and some of Sonny's great passion. I saw Air. I loved it. I really loved it, and I think how much of it is true and how much was the opportunity to get Viola Davis to play Jordan's mom, I think, is probably something that is a time for another conversation. But I thought it was a really well constructed movie, and
my last question,
I really liked it.
My last question and my closing question is, how much are you enjoying being a grandpa?
He's here right now, Brooks. He's named after Brooks Koepka, and it tells you a little bit about my son-in-law and his love of golf. He's just a piece of work. He's like, what is he now, 13 months old. And I just left him a few moments ago. He was sound asleep, but I just heard him. So he's up and and talking to himself. So yeah, I'm gonna head over now and play Grandpa. But it's the best thing. It's you forget, because I was, you know what I was like, Frank. I mean, I was like a little bit of Billy. I was hardly home, and you forget what it was like to, you know, Dee Dee, who you've known for going on, what is it, 43 years now of marriage. You know, she did so much, and I was away, you know, taking care of the family. This one here is so fun to go, oh God, that's what it's like to raise a baby. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I feel the same way. Billy feels the same
Close.
way, and
Nothing like it.
Yeah.
Derek doesn't want to feel the same way for quite yet. But
Yeah.
it's
Well, good for Derek. We always need guys like Derek. You know, we can live through Derek.
He's got 2 kids of marrying age, so it's going to be
Could be soon.
Oh, boy.
could be soon for him. Anyway,
All right.
Thanks so much, pal. You've been
You bet,
great.
guys. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. Loved it.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you for
buy the
having me
book.
on.
I think everybody out there should buy the book. I'm definitely going to
thank
buy
you.
it.
It's
It's called Billy
Walker.
Walter, Secrets of a Life at Risk.
The Gamble.
Thank you. All right, boys.
Take
Thanks
care.
again.
Take care, Armen.
Okay. Bye-bye.
You see that, Frank?
See that?
There you go.
See
Done.
that?
D-U-N.
Recording stopped.
D-U-N.
Done. What we got to do is, that's why you got to tell everybody out there, we got to tell our audience, you got to make a bet every day, because otherwise you could be walking around lucky and not know it.
Yep.
You got to make a bet.
You got it. Well, well, I've always lived by, you got to do something dangerous once a day. You've always got to take, not dangerous, but take a chance.
Oh, that's interesting.
You've always
I've
got to
heard this
take a
before.
chance one time a day.
Yeah, but at our age, I mean, taking a chance is walking past the men's room. It's like taking a chance.
Without your diaper on. Without your Depends
I
on.
got my Depends on. Like, I'm taking a piss right now. I mean, I don't got to get up no more.
Depends. You hear
I'm
that?
happy
Nice, nice sponsor.
Oh, say goodnight.
Say
Billy.
goodnight, Billy.
Say goodnight, Derek. Thank you.
Good night, Frank.
Next week's guest, the famous MLB umpire Joe West, is back for our 3rd anniversary show. We'll see you next week.